Good morning, André. Thank you very much for taking the time to discuss the situation in Latin America with the blue like an orange ecosystem. Let me ask you a first question. It seems that Latin America has suffered more than most regions in the world from COVID. How do you see the rebound for the region?
Well, we are seeing a better performance in 2021, which is true for the whole of the world. We should regain some ground and then continue in 2022. The key is vaccination, vaccination, vaccination. That is quite important because there are other things like the price of commodities. They are looking better. The price of oil for the oil exporters, that's looking better. And international trade is recovering. Investment flows, not quite yet there, not recovered to the pre-pandemic level, but hopefully moving in that direction. So really the big question now is the vaccination issue, because this hits you in many ways. The problem of cash flow, the current account, for example, it hits you from the side of export, it hits you from the side of direct foreign investment, hits you, and this is true for all over the world, not just Latin America. It hits you, in the case of Latin America, remittances, for example. But then it also increases your expenditures because you have to spend a lot more, not only on the health side, but also on taking care of the consequences of the pandemic. That means to help the more vulnerable. And there you can see that practically every country is doing its best. Now, Latin America, we have to understand, Latin America does not have the same fiscal space that the United States or Europe. They don't have the European Central Bank in order to buy all the debt that they issue. So, in the case of Latin America, what you need to do is to balance the question of the fight against the virus, which has to be first and foremost, and then, of course, looking at the public finance side, simply because you do not have negative interest rates in Latin America, and second, you, as I said, do not have the same fiscal space. On the other hand, you have much greater potential for growth, for the recovery on the upside. Why? Because in Latin America, we have the tradition that a little bit goes a long way. So I think that a gradual change in expectations, which is happening, as I said, the other elements are looking better, and therefore I believe that in that sense that the region has something to look forward to.
Well, thank you. So you will soon be leaving the OECD after 15 years at its head. You have transformed the organization, and in particular, from my perspective, you have played a very big role around impact and sustainable finance. How would you assess your legacy in that respect?
Well, this is, I would say in one line, our motto: better policies for better lives. This is what we are about. We redefined this in 2011 when we were approaching our 50th anniversary, and we have lived through that. We're now 10 years later. We have been practicing that. And I would say that the OECD of today is more impactful, more relevant, more influential, better heard, and also through our work with the G7, with the G20, with APEC, that our standards are being disseminated in a much wider way, wider set of countries and people. So I think that would be, in a nutshell, how I would describe what has happened in the last 15 years. The OECD changed. The OECD is different. The OECD is stronger. The OECD is more present. And the OECD, in many ways, is a leader in public policies and also working with the private sector on private policies. And now that we're talking pandemic, the question of recovery is crucial. The quality of the recovery, green, resilient, inclusive, all the things that we are talking all the time. In the case of the OECD, we put our COVID-19 digital hub, the coronavirus hub, and we have channeled approximately 200 pieces of research and work and recommendations and comparisons and analysis on every aspect of the works that we do, whether it is on education or on health issues or on SMEs or on tourism, just digital matters, etc. On everything that we work on, it has been digital, and the COVID and tourism and the COVID, SMEs and the COVID, education and the COVID. We just put out a whole book about 1 year in education during COVID and all the impacts. So I think in that sense, the OECD is today a better institution, a more relevant institution, and as I said before, and a very important part of the world's governance infrastructure, together with the IMF, together with the World Bank, together with the European Union, together with the United Nations, etc. We play certain roles that are now much clearer, that are getting the other institutions to work with us. We work with them and for them, to support them. When it comes to the UN, I always say that we don't want the Oscar for best film. We only want the Oscar for best supporting cast. Because we recognize when the UN has the lead and we support them.
Thank you. Let me focus now more on the financial sector itself. You've played a role on working on sustainable finance in particular. When you look back, where do you think you've made most progress, and what remains to be done if we focus really on sustainable finance, sustainable investment impact?
It used to be that, sustainable finance was a way to say that it's green. But that has changed with the pandemic, because now we not only have the choice to go green, right now we absolutely must go green. It is the only way to go. We have lost so much ground in terms of growth, jobs, poverty, all the, and when you're talking about Latin America, when you're talking about Africa, when you're talking about Asia, we really have lost a lot of ground. And but one of the things that has come up so strongly is that any type of future development has to be green, has to be consistent with our single most important intergenerational responsibility, which is to preserve and protect the planet.
And do you trust the financial sector can move naturally in the right direction?
I believe that the private sector is always very intelligent and very keen to understand what is in their own best interest, at least most of the time. And I have to say that going green, as I said, is not a way to go, but the way to go. And therefore that the private sector will increasingly be ready to finance that way of doing things, the way of doing things, which is to go green. So and then you are seeing that many of the investment funds and the hedge funds and the big banks, etc., are no longer financing emissions. Are no longer now. They're doing better than the government sometimes, because part of these trillions and trillions and trillions that are being thrown at the virus, still only a very small percentage is really, truly, deliberately green, and a lot of it is mostly traditional, and therefore there's a mix, and some of it is harmful for the environment. Probably as much as there is very deliberately green, there is investment that is harmful. So we're not yet there in terms of the selection and the projects and the tools.
Yes, some might argue that there are 50 shades of green, if you allow me, meaning that people are a little bit lost with all the standards, the norms. It's very difficult to navigate this the emergence of the new system today. And on the one hand, you tend to see a European approach, that might be, which is more led by regulation. There is an American approach, which you might argue is more led by the market. There might be a Chinese approach. Do you think we can have a global perspective on that, or we are condemned to have a fragmentation of approaches?
I think the regulatory aspect is important, and to the greatest possible extent, a homogenization of regulations is clearly desirable. But the practice is important. The fact that the Americans are driving in a certain, driving the green side in a certain way, that the Europeans are doing it their own way with the Green Deal, and that the Chinese are pursuing their own way. That is also, that's rich, that's good, because they learn from each other. And remember, when you say Europe, what are you talking about? You're talking about all the American banks that are established in Europe, plus a lot of the European banks, most of which, all the big ones, are acting in the United States. It's not many of the larger Chinese banks are all represented in the United States. Many of them are acting in Europe. So finance is, it's the most globalized activity, and it globalizes in a few seconds. And therefore, that's good that you have these different approaches, because that enriches the mix.
Thank you. There is another topic where the OECD has taken a very visible role and a very visible lead. It's tax harmonization. How do you think this topic might evolve after your leaving? Because, a lot of things are happening as we speak.
I think that we are on a, hopefully irreversible direction, and that is that we are going to have a deal, a notional deal, the elements of the deal by July. Will probably start with final commitments in September, October, because it may require for us to wait for some legislation to be passed in some of the more important players. But I think the change in the United States was crucial because 138 countries were moving forward, and the 139th was saying, no, hold it. So they were blocking progress. And now the new administration has made a 180-degree turn. And now not only is there this idea that it's not just the question of the digital taxation, it's the question of the largest corporations in the world. And also there's the element of the minimum tax, which is being discussed. I don't want to get into any details right now because the 10.5 was originally, now they're saying 21, and they'll be discussing the range. But basically, it's a whole new ballgame, and we're going to get a deal. I can tell you that. I would have liked to be around by the time this culminated, but there's going to be a change at the head of the OECD, and so he'll be the one that presides over this process. But it's one where 139 countries are involved. But I can tell you, what we have achieved there is incredible. Imagine that today there are 84 million bank accounts which are known to the bosses of the tax offices all over the world. So, all the French, the French citizens who have accounts abroad are known to the French tax boss, or to whoever is in charge of the tax office. But the same for Mexico, the same for Turkey, the same for Italy, the same for the United States. So nowhere to hide. And 84 million bank accounts, they are worth 10 trillion euros, which is about half of the GDP of the United States, just to give you an idea. Already about 107 billion, this with a B, have already been recovered by because there are fines and there are projects and programs where the authorities are saying, listen, I got the details of your account. Would you come and have a cup of coffee with us, because we need to clarify this, So everybody says, okay, how can I fix this? And there are hundreds of thousands around the world that are doing this as we speak. So this is a real revolution. Nowhere to hide, But when it comes to the digital, I think we'll get a deal. Yeah.
Thank you. Just to conclude, I have a more personal question, if you allow me. If I tell you blue like an orange, what do you see?
Well, I see a certain paradox, a certain contradiction in a way. It fixes the mind, absolutely. You start imagining a blue-orange, or you start imagining the world also, because the world is typically portrayed as being kind of blue, or in a blue horizon, and it also, I think, is a game of words. I don't know, I was always quite intrigued since the very beginning when I heard the expression for the first time. I like to say that in that sense, one always looks for something that sticks in people's minds, because there's so many names, and there's so many brands. Even in finance, there's so many brands, and everybody's got a particular word that they want to distinguish them. Either the name of a person, or in this case, this concept is, well, to say the least, maybe a little bit controversial, maybe a little bit exotic, maybe a little bit, but it does that trick, and that stays with the mind. It stays, it sticks, you know, which is good.
Thank you. I hope it will stick with your mind forever. Thank you very much, Angel, for your time and your generosity, and we wish you well for whatever happens to you next. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's been fun, and of course, you and I started working on water issues, etc., since long before I joined the OECD. So the friendship goes for a long, long time, and it will stay.
Thank you.